Warning: the following contains explicit language and subject matter that may not be suitable for younger listeners, church folk, and people who enjoy kale smoothies.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to A Pod Amongst Men. I'm your host, Steve B., and these are coffee break conversations for the 21st century. We're back. We're finally back. It's been a long week, a lot going on. I don't know what the rest of you is, but we're back, and I'm recording this intro at a different time than when we recorded the episode. I had to do a bulk bunch of episodes at once because it was the young man's 10th birthday, so I wanted to make sure I was free for the whole weekend. And it was, and he had a good time. We did some magic, and we did all kinds of crazy shit. Anyway, that one changed color, this one didn't. I don't know why. Regardless. So my guest today is an old friend of mine, just like last week, is my friend Denis D. And we used to study martial arts together. You know, he was very, very close with my family for a time when we were young. Excuse me. And he was kind enough to join us on Zoom and tell us about some of his life's more interesting journeys. So Denis has gotten to do some really cool stuff involving sailing the world, seeing, just more countries than any one man should. But I've always seen his stuff on Facebook, and we haven't really seen each other in many years. So keeping up with him and seeing all these cool exploits, I was really happy that he got that he took the time to come talk to us and tell us about some of it. So I hope you guys enjoy. This is my conversation with Denis Dowling.
Close that program out. Hey.
You sound good. You got nothing to worry about. You look good too, man. Been quite some time.
I don't know about that. It's been a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah, we're both getting old now. So
yeah, it happens.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? I feel like one of the last times I saw you, we were like grappling at the dojo. We were doing.
That's probably right. Yeah, you and I have probably spent more time trying to kill each other than anyone else I've known in my lifetime.
But only in a good way. It was never like there's no malice behind it. I think we need to put that disclaimer in there.
Yeah, absolutely. No, in a very positive way. It was training for sport.
But so like what have you been up to? How's your mom, by the way?
My mom's great. She's living down in Florida. She's been she lives with my grandmother and one of my aunts and spends most of her time taking care of my grandmother, which is great because she's able to do that. There definitely were, some hard times going down the road for her for sure, but she's in a good place. She's comfortable. And the only, I think, really hard part right now is that we haven't gotten to see each other in more than a year. And she's gotten to do some really cool trips with me and visit me in various cool ports around the world and go sailing. And she's really the place where my sailing life started. So it's been nice to be able to give that back to her.
Yeah.
In a way,
Well, the stuff that you've been doing that I've been, very following as closely as I can just through social media has been pretty impressive, I guess would be a good word to use. It's just like you've got to travel to so many different places that, I won't lie, I'm definitely a little envious of, but it's pretty amazing, man. And that's really one of the reasons I wanted to get you on here, aside from the fact that we actually know each other and it's been really long since we've spoken. But you have like what I think is a pretty amazing story, and I'm really looking forward to hearing you share that here. And I think a lot of people are going to be able to get a lot of benefit from that and get value from it. So we already did I already have like an intro that I'll record after the fact, and then if you're listening, you've already heard it. But do you want to kind of describe yourself for the audience? Kind of, give yourself your own intro so people know who you are.
Wow. Well,
Just kind of like,
my name.
yeah, say who you are, where you're from, what do you do, basically.
Yeah, my name is Dennis Dowling, and I grew up in a suburb of Philadelphia. Had a very fair upbringing as far as most of the world is concerned, and found myself asking a lot of questions around college years and what was it that I wanted to do with my life. It seemed to me at the time, and I think probably more so now, something not to be squandered. Um, I was never really that excited about uh, spending time in an office or a classroom, and I I wanted to see the world and I wanted to create my own story. So I abandoned all that stuff, and I
So if I could interrupt for one sec,
sure.
before we get to the juicy stuff, I want to kind of go back a little bit to. I want to talk a little bit about like your upbringing, like what makes you you. Like you said you mentioned you grew up in a suburb of Philadelphia, which I know the listeners don't, but like what was it like? Just a typical suburban life, like anything different? I know like now you don't have any brothers or sisters that I was aware of. Is that still the case or?
So that we were going to dive into the complicated stuff now. You want to leave apart the juicy stuff, but no, I mean, I have an amazing family of, I was the first of 14 grandkids on my mom's side. She's got six brothers and sisters, and my grandmother is just the matriarch of the family. My grandfather unfortunately passed away a number of years ago, but that's been the core structure of our family. On my father's side, things were definitely more difficult and complicated, and he just kind of disappeared into the world. I know that he's got a couple of kids now, and um, I'm really not sure about that side of the family. I did kind of reach out to him. In fact, I went and knocked on his door before I left for the adventure that's led me here.
Really?
Um,
What was that like?
that was that was very important. Um, I didn't really know what to expect. I felt kind of uh, abandoned and forgotten, and um, didn't really know what would happen. I was 21 years old.
Oh yeah,
Can we
let them
curse
all
on this?
fly, buddy. I'm in
Okay, sorry.
construction.
I
Okay,
just don't know if I need to
yeah.
censor myself or
Don't worry
something.
about it. Like I said, I'm in
I
construction.
don't.
I would never have a podcast that we couldn't curse on. It just wouldn't be right.
Okay, I'm a sailor, so I don't want it to be like bleep 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 bleep. But yeah, I mean, I knocked on the door and he came and answered it. He didn't know who I was, but it was really kind of trippy in a way because as I walked up the pathway to the door, I could see this kid in the backyard on a swing set who looked exactly like me when I was, 6 years old or seven, however old he was at the time. And it was like, I was like sweating and like super stressed out, and I'm about to confront my, estranged father that disappeared when I was 10. And, he answered the door and he looked up and can I help you? And I said, yeah, well, I think so. I'm Dennis Dowling. And he just like went white. He invited me in, and we talked for a really short while. Um, and he said, hang on a second I need to do something. And he got up and left, and he came back with these two kids who are my, half brother and sister, and introduced me as the long lost brother,
Hmm.
which was, super awkward because it's like, I came here to talk to you, and like, we're not there yet, man.
Yeah.
Like, we should be like taking a drive or going to a bar or something.
Hmm.
Um, and so he just didn't handle it well. And then I kind of, in a tactful way, cut that short, and
Mm-hmm.
he asked to get together one more time before I left for California, which was kind of the first step in my modern journey. And that was kind of when things really set into perspective, because like I said, for a long time, a great portion of my life, I thought, this is what's wrong with me? Like, why doesn't my dad want to be part of my life? And um, I remember sitting in the living room, and in the middle of a seemingly meaningful conversation, he looked out the front window of the house and kind of went, "What the fuck is that? This neighborhood's just gone to shit." And I looked out the window, and there's just this young black kid walking down the street. So yeah, my father's a racist.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you know my dad pretty well, better than a lot of people, and me and him haven't spoken in a long time. And if it makes you feel any better about finding brothers and sisters, I found out I had a sister that I never knew about through MySpace. So yeah, lots changed since the last time I saw you. But
uh,
it's like how old was your dad when you were born? Do you know?
when I was born,
Yeah, like when they had you.
he was he was probably my age, maybe a couple of years younger. So
Yeah.
I would say 35,
Oh,
somewhere around
really?
there.
Okay, because I like my dad was 22
Uh,
when he had me, and I can only like I can't even imagine what kind of father I would have been at 22. So as I've gotten older, I've kind of looked at a lot of the mistakes he made and a lot of the things he did that really impacted me that I carried with me through my whole life. And as much as I held a lot of anger and resentment, and still do to that extent, the older I get, the more the kind of like, it's like, listen, you fucked up. Okay, you were a stupid kid, and you didn't want to take responsibility for this, that, and the third, and maybe I think I just kind of I'm not holding. I don't want to say I'm not holding him responsible, but I kind of look back. It's like, yeah, I get it. You fucked up. You were young. I probably would have fucked up somewhere along the way as well. But like that was stuff that I carried with me for a long time, and like I said, I still do. Like, we don't have the best relationship. We don't even talk. But it's as now I have a kid of my own and another one on the way. It's easy to make mistakes, man. It really is. But
yeah, I have one of my best friends in the world has two kids, and he and I have been. That's kind of a great little side story. I met him. I must have been about like 16 years old, 17, on a family vacation in Florida, and was nominated as the only sober person at the occasion to drive to 7-Eleven to pick up some more beer, along with some older friends of mine. And they went into the market, got the beer, and they all came back all giggly. They were making eyes with this guy that was in buying beer as well. And as the guy came out, he came to the car and invited us to this random house party, mostly because all of my older friends were female, I think, and incredibly cute. And then he got into this, Prius or Toyota Celica or whatever it was next to us. And as he opened the door, the guy in the driver's seat was in his boxer shorts and nothing else. And that was how I met Chris Hain, who is literally married my wife and I. He, got his, minister's certificate and stuff, and
wow.
he's just been an amazing friend ever since. But
I was gonna say
he's
this
got
is in
these.
Florida. You said correct?
This was in Florida. Yeah,
That's a
he
very
now
Florida
lives.
thing. Just be driving around in your boxers.
Apparently, the party had turned to strip poker and gotten out of hand, and he was losing, which is why he had to drive to the store. But he and I have done some awesome things over the years, and we haven't seen him since last February, just because of the shutdowns and mad plague circumnavigating the globe. But I said, how do you feel about being a father? And he said, I'm just trying not to fuck him up too bad.
That's all it is. That's all it is. You try to keep them alive and try to do the least amount of damage possible. That's really all it is. I mean, and it's, I've talked about this with my wife so much. It's like you can't change who a kid is going to be. You can only put them in the best possible situations, keep them healthy, make sure they they have what they need. But all the smothering and all the helicopter parenting in the world is not gonna make a kid who you want them to be. They are who they are, whether you like it or not. And as parents, we just have to kind of hope we can let them be the best version of who that person is as possible. That's all it is. We try to control stuff, and it's pointless. It's like just try to make them do their homework, eat their vegetables, and get their sleep. Make sure they're not hanging out with scumbag friends like me. But so now we talked about your dad. Now, like that was, you said, around 21, correct?
Right about there. Yeah, that's when I left home.
So this is after college. You were at East Stroudsburg, right?
Yeah, I went to East Stroudsburg for 2 years. I learned a lot, not about, not necessarily. I mean, it's weird the way that different people consider education valuable and the types of education that is. So
I'll tell you what, I've been to East Stroudsburg a couple times. You know what I learned? That I'm not good with weed. It just doesn't agree with me. Does not agree with me. That's what I learned.
Well, there was certainly that aspect of it. But I found that it agreed with me quite well, and maybe it didn't. Who's to say at this
For
point?
what it's worth, it's a similar story to a lot of people I know that went to East Stroudsburg. All of a sudden, they came back. They was like, "Oh, you ever listen to Bob Marley?" I was like, "Jesus Christ, what happened to you up there?" You know what I mean? They all have like the black lights in their dorms and stuff. It's just
that was exactly my experience. And and I was also studying philosophy and world religion. I was. It was explained to me by my high school guidance counselors that I was really talented with foreign languages and I should be a Spanish teacher. Like, this is your goal in life. Like, here it is on a platter. And you need to go to this school and you need to take these classes and that's what you're going to do with your life. And that was just so the end of the universe for me. Whereas the actual experience of being there really kind of opened up a lot of cognitive processes that I was completely unaware of. And a sense of, this isn't enough. Mm-hmm. I remember sitting in like a dorm room party situation with those same black lights that you're talking about, and everyone's kind of like spinning off the walls, and I wasn't really part of that. I remember sitting looking out the window and like thinking, look at all this stuff. Like, it's just man-made stuff that's going to become garbage. And is there not a more meaningful way? Like, am I really going to do this? Am I going to spend the rest of my life in a classroom teaching like elementary Spanish to kids who are going to forget it as soon as they graduate? And that's not always the case, because I have to, in that sense, I have to pay a lot of respect to the teachers that I had at that time, because at the beginning, I remember in middle school, I had a teacher who was kind of like just really not engaging and really not caring or affectionate in that sense of fostering the talents in her classroom. But when I got to high school, I had this amazing teacher who really saw that there was like, I was very talented with language, and that drove me to want to be better and learn the language and treat it with respect and understand what it could do for me in the future. And
how is your Spanish these days?
It's, todo bien, perfecto.
Really?
He viajado por todo Centroamérica, España.
You're gonna get along great with my wife. She's Cuban, so I'm good enough where we went to Madrid and I can go and order food and go do what I got to do, but I'm not conversational yet. But That's pretty cool. She's going to get a lot out of this.
That's steps in the right direction. And just, kind of rounding out that point, what happened when I got to college was that the school that I went to for high school was really quite good. And I was an advanced speaker. And when I got to college, I spoke, I sat in the first Spanish class that they put me in based on my level where they saw me coming from high school. And it was like huge steps backwards. It was like, I'm not going to learn anything here. And I went to the teacher afterward and I spoke to her in Spanish and I said, look, I think that I probably shouldn't be in this class. And there's maybe something more advanced that would suit, my abilities. And she was like,
Yeah, no shit.
you're not. Yeah. So we went into the, I don't know what you call it, where all the professors have their offices, and introduced me to their director and my advisor. And then the class that they put me in was the last class that they had before, aspiring Spanish teachers graduated.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, well, I'm a freshman. This is like my first week, and you're going to put me in the end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm in the most advanced class, and it's not advanced enough.
I'm not going to waste my time, And so I really, God, I hope my mother never hears about this, but like, I spent those couple of years, she knows it anyway. That's no joke. I spent those couple of years exploring my own psychology and deciding what it was that I didn't want to do with my life and what the possibilities for my life were. I never really imagined that it would lead to here, but you got to ask the questions to get the answers.
Yeah, it's just one more step along the journey, man. Like you can't really skip anything when it comes to life. It happens when it's supposed to happen. So now we're moving forward. You're 21. This is now after you've met your dad. Where does life take you next? This is the juicy part I was referring to. This is where the.
Oh man, this could go on forever too. Because
that's fine. We're not. Listen, I'm the boss here. We could do this as long or as short as we want.
Now we're at the beginning of the story. Let's see how we can do the Reader's Digest, because it gets way better as we go on. But my family moved to Florida. I had a random job at an interpreting company. So what we did was provide like telephonic interpreter services for anyone from like FEMA to 911 or 311 in New York. Judges and magistrates, like they would call in like, yeah, we arrested Jose Gonzalez. We need a Spanish speaking interpreter who, is familiar with the Cuban dialect. Okay. And so we would source them and get them on the phone within like 30 seconds. And that was just a job. But my family decided to move to Florida. I was supposed to follow closely along behind them and finish up with like the emptying and the preparation for the sale of the house. And I went out one evening to play some music at a bar in Doylestown, and I met this girl, and I fell in love with her. I don't think that the feeling was completely mutual, but she was moving to California like a week later, and she was like, "Oh, why don't you come on out when you get a chance?" And I was like, "Okay."
Yeah. Shit, so what are you doing tomorrow?
So, I sold all my shit, and I found this like business card at a local like postal place that was like, we sell your stuff on eBay. And so these, kind guys came by with a moving truck and picked up all my stuff that I didn't need anymore, and drove off with it, and I never heard from them again. So, but I didn't know that at the time. I
didn't know you were making a charitable donation.
I did not.
Oh, Jesus.
But, I bought a train ticket on Amtrak and took it from Philly to California. And when I got there, this girl, Sarah, was kind of like, well, it's nice to see you again. What are you doing here? Can I drop you off somewhere?
Yeah. So I don't think my boyfriend's going to like you being here.
Yeah. I mean, she was on her own journey. It wasn't like malicious or anything. It
Nah,
was
I know.
just
That's,
like,
you got me
what
beat.
happened?
I never went all the way out to California. The farthest I went for a girl, the second farthest I went for a girl was North Carolina. And then that girl just didn't, it was the same thing. She was not interested that way. So, and then it's like, all right, well, it's an 8-hour drive home. I guess I'll see you later.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it was a little bit, different because it's, it's a 48-hour train ride or something like that. And when I ended up in Ocean Beach, the hippie and homeless armpit of America, and found out that all my stuff was gone forever and I was never going to see a dime of it. And I couldn't call my mom for help and say, well, of course I could. And she would have bought me a plane ticket immediately. But there was some kind of arrogance and responsibility that I needed to hold on my own. That was like, I came all the way here. But, I ended up very broke and very homeless all at once, and found myself a little cove in Sunset Cliffs and slept there for a bit. It
How
wasn't
long?
long. It
Oh,
wasn't
okay.
long. It was a couple of weeks, but it was like, I woke up one morning. I had a little fire going that had kind of shifted, wind directions in the night and blown smoke in my face. And I just woke up feeling like a rotten bag of awfulness. And I thought, well, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
So what did I come here for? What am I doing? And as I was sitting there thinking about that, I was looking out through the cove, and from one rocky side of it, there popped out this little sailing boat with beautiful red sails and headed off toward the horizon. And I thought, well, I grew up doing that, and I remember really enjoying it. And I should probably learn everything there is about boats in the ocean and go sail around the world. And at that same moment, I looked up on the cliff above on one side, and there was this woman doing yoga at sunrise, who I had met a couple of times. I didn't recognize her it was a far off distance, but she, I think, recognized me and kind of waved, and we ended up connecting. And she said, you look super well. Why don't you come home to my house and I'll make you some breakfast and you take a wash up and reconsider the future. Which I did. And that same day, immediately after breakfast and a wash down, I wandered down to the docks in Point Loma, and I introduced myself to anyone who would listen to me. Hi, I'm Denis Dowling. I'll do all the dirtiest jobs that you have. I just want to learn everything that I can about boats in the ocean.
And it was just that simple. You just like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to dedicate my entire life to this. It was just, wow. That's amazing, man. That really is. Like, I mean, it's literally the stuff that they make movies about.
Yeah, I mean, I know it sounds far-fetched, but that's how it went down. And what's really interesting is that how it went down after that was exactly that. Like the first opportunity that I got led to the second and the third and the fourth, and has led me to where I am right now.
So let me see if I can guess. Like, bear with me. They took you to an island in the South Pacific called Muay Thai Island, and there they made you do all these chores, and they were training other guys to be Muay Thai fighters, and you were studying them while you were doing the chores, and then you actually learned the fighting style and became an actual champion Muay Thai fighter, and then you participated in this quest, and you won a golden dragon, and that was the plot of the movie The Quest with Jean-Claude Van Damme.
I remember that movie well. We probably watched it together when we were
I know
kids.
we did.
it's a terrible movie, but you know, from where we were coming from at the time,
it was cool.
It was cool.
That was
But that's actually, if we substitute South Pacific Island for Athens, Greece, that's exactly what happened.
Hey, the Greeks. I know the Greeks. Tikanis, kala. Yeah.
Polikala, bravo.
Yeah. I have a couple Greek friends, so I've kind of at one point I was dubbed an honorary Greek to the denizens of Somerville, New Jersey.
Nice.
But
That's a hard thing to do.
yeah, I know. I just I didn't shy away from doing some Bekiko at a couple weddings, and they tend to like that. Throw a few extra singles out there, next thing you know, you're part of the family. All right, so now you're doing these essentially odd jobs, I guess you could say, around like the docks and learning about sailing. So what's the next chapter?
What I was doing was I met a really wonderful old guy, Ron Strathman, who had a 57-foot wood schooner, and he was running his business by himself in the day, and then he'd come home, sometime around dark, and work on this, neglected 30-year-old wooden boat. So he hired me to help him with it, and I apprenticed under him, and then it led to this, it was a really interesting relationship because he was this, gruff shaved head ex-Marine who, was still kind of in some aspects of his mind in Vietnam. And I was this, 22-year-old sponge of a random kid that came from out east. And we were kind of the unlikeliest of friends. But there were a few things that he said at the time that still ring true. And it was like, I remember him saying, when good people come along, good people recognize them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is that moment. So, you're welcome here, and I'm happy to teach you. And the other thing that, I think of quite often these days is, if you want to outsmart these fuckers, you got to wake up earlier than them.
Yeah, just outwork everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good approach.
But, it was that project that led to, I bought myself a little boat of my own that was a cool little classic, and I was living on that on one dock, and his boat was on the next. And so I was, the commute was rather pleasant. It was a dock walk, and I was sitting in my cockpit one night with a bottle of wild turkey and my guitar, just, howling at the moon. And this random weird guy walks by, and he's like, "Hey, man, where is the party?" And that turned out to be my best friend in the world. And shortly thereafter, he was like, "Hey, look, how long are you going to work on that boat over there?" I was like, the project's coming to an end. And he's like, "Well, look, I was thinking we go down to Panama and see what's going on down there." And I'm like, "Man, I can't afford to go to Panama. Like, are you nuts?"
So wait, how long were you working on that boat?
Well, it actually turned into like kind of compartmentalized sessions over the course of a few years. Okay. But this was kind of the end of the first session, and I was very curious of like, what am I going to do next? Because, now I bought this little boat and I have this skill set that I'm developing, and I really just want to continue that, and I want to go sailing. And so it dawned on me in this, weird conversation that he was there commissioning this huge, like, for me, it was huge at the time. It was a 64-foot brand new luxury yacht that he was putting together to go travel around with. And I was like, "Wait, didn't you tell me that boat is going to Panama?" And he's like, "Keep going, man. You almost figured it out." So that's how I became the first mate on an ocean sailing vessel. And wow. So that led me to Panama. Panama decided to continue through the canal and then across the Caribbean, which is kind of one of the heavier passages around the world. Not if you're coming from the other side. It's funny because if you read the pilot book, it says that most people find this to be one of the most arduous passages of the globe, going from the Caribbean islands, the West Indies to Panama. We were going the opposite direction against the weather and all the equatorial currents. So, we were just zigzagging back and forth and all over the place. We broke a ton of stuff, and it was a real mess, but it was trial by fire, and not our first rodeo either. The Yorgos, who I was sailing with, and was teaching me along with his wife, Kirsten, she and I were kind of learning together, because she hadn't spent any time at sea. So he'd taken a lot upon himself to put together this green crew of people that he really wanted to spend time with. And to me, that's really the bigger than all the seamanship and everything else that I learned during that trip. And I didn't quite understand this until later, having spent time at sea with people who I wasn't very fond of. But the crew is everything. And I think that's one of the biggest life lessons from all this, is that you can be, and you can translate this into landlubber speak, but you can be on the worst
landlubber speak
worst boat in the world with the best people and have the greatest time. I mean, the thing can be sinking and you're laughing about it while
you're right. That
dealing
translates
with it.
Yeah, it translates into everything. Even like something as simple as work. You could have a shitty job, but work with really great people, and it just makes the day so much better.
Exactly.
So you can have a cake job and work with an asshole, and then there you go. Now you just dread going to work every day. So what is it like? What is a typical day like? Working a boat. Like, say, for instance, that particular journey, going through the canal, going through the Caribbean. Like, what does a typical day at sea consist of for a guy in your position at that time?
A lot of cleaning.
Okay. How many hours a day are you really working? Is it just like something that you have to consistently do all through, or...
So, I mean, it depends completely. Like, there's a few different aspects to it. So let's say, first and foremost, you're in port getting ready for a charter with the owner.
Okay.
That's a high-end, like, luxury experience. So everything has to be perfectly polished and clean and look like the boat is brand new. And, it's all hands on deck and like 16 hours a day to get things ready. And then it's 16 hours a day once they're on board, and you're serving them 3 meals a day and then, appetizers and desserts, and cleaning incessant amounts of dishes and serving incessant amounts of wine and vodka and whatever it is that they, fancy at that time. And then there's the kind of incessant refit and maintenance work that goes on after that and before your next leg of, traveling to the next location where they're going to do that again. Lucky for us, I don't know if it was lucky for us, but we were making real miles, which kept it interesting and not stagnant, and not like I'm just sitting here at the dock polishing stainless steel for 16 hours a day.
Yeah.
It was also at a time before the super yachting industry really had peaked. So this was like a big boat at the time, and something that was really unique. And everywhere we went, it was kind of inspiring to people. It was like this crew of pirates are sailing around the world on this luxury yacht, and what the fuck is that? But and then the part that you really want to get at is the ocean moments, and that's an incredible thing. You leave the Caribbean to sail to Europe, and you're making 2,000 miles to the Azores nonstop. There's no place to go. I mean, you could put into Bermuda, but it's not really worth the stop on that run. You keep it close aboard in case you have an emergency and you need to stop there. But, every time I've done it, it's been hell-bent on Azores, and then we'll carry on, because by that point you need fuel and you need supplies and stuff.
So now the first time you made that trip, was it there wasn't, like, you have to forgive my landlubber speak, as you put it, but like, you weren't on an actual sailboat, you were on a yacht, correct?
Yeah, well, a sailboat is a yacht. Is
Okay,
it's
yeah. A lot of
we're
us.
not.
I'm not. My experience on at sea on boats is extremely limited, so you have to excuse my ignorance here.
So it's hard because a lot of us think of. I think a lot of people think of yacht these days on the standard of like below deck.
Hmm.
And that's just not really the case. A yacht technically is any nautical floating craft that's used for pleasure.
Okay.
So depending on how well maintained it is, a kayak can be a yacht, but we don't think of it in that sense. So we're talking about a 64-foot sailboat, which
Gotcha.
we would also call a yacht. But there are three of us on board, and you have to break up. Someone always has to be on deck on watch,
Mhm.
and there's no place to anchor. The ocean's a little deep for that. So you're constantly in motion. Your entire life is constantly in motion. So like even something as simple as going to pee, which I might have to do at some point during this.
That's fine.
If we keep rolling, I hope we could cut that part out
Yeah,
or
don't
not,
worry.
whatever.
Actually, could you take the camera in the bathroom with you?
But
The fans will love it. The kids will love it.
well, I could demonstrate this is what it's like to pee at sea, because you're holding on to everything. Your whole world is moving around you,
Yeah.
and literally all the simplest thing. I mean, think about cooking, like just making boiled pasta with some butter on it. The stove is moving back and forth like this. Really, the boat is moving like this. The stove is more or less stationary because it's got a gimbal on it, so it's moving less. But you have to pour that into a moving sink and not burn yourself or anyone else or spill it everywhere. So just these little things become contests, and yet there's so much harmony in it because you're all in it together and you're all accomplishing this very common and very concise goal of we're taking care of each other, we're taking care of the boat, and the only thing that we're thinking about is food and weather.
Hmm.
So the entire cosmos of your existence becomes incredibly simplified because there aren't very many things that matter. You're not getting this endless news cycle. You don't know what politicians said what today. You don't know anything. And it wasn't really a time of satcoms. So there were so many instances where we would get to the end of a long passage, 12 or 15 or 20 days at sea. And you're forced to kind of wonder if some global pandemic has taken over the world, or
Yeah.
if there's been some natural disaster, or if there's anyone at all, because you haven't seen anyone.
You're dreading like a 28 days later scenario.
But it's so I got carried away there, but a lot of
No,
what
no, no. It's all
happens
good, man.
a lot of what happens is that you're three people taking care of 24-hour shifts, or maybe four, depending on the size of the crew. But most of the time on that particular trip, we were just three of us. And, we left the watch schedule rather flexible. I mean, a lot of people will run it's 3 hours on, 6 hours off in that scenario. But it was like, yeah, this is the vague thing, 3 hours on, 6 hours off. But if you're up and you're feeling good and you can let the others sleep a little longer, because you're not necessarily sleeping in that scenario. You're getting, in some situations, you're struggling to stay in bed because it's trying to throw you physically out of it.
Yeah. Wow. It's when you really think about those little things, it completely changes a lot of people's perception of what it really consists of. Like just
Yeah,
a simple thing as sleeping, or what are you gonna eat? How are you gonna cook the food? What are you gonna live on Cliff Bars the whole time? Like there's a lot that goes into it that I think a lot of people don't really consider.
there is, but you get that's where it gets beautiful, is because you get into the rhythm of it, and you find that you can sleep anywhere in any conditions, and then you find that you can cook anything, and you're like, well, I think that I will make some fresh brioche buns today from scratch to make some hamburgers with bacon on them because that's what I really want. And okay, you don't always have these kinds of supplies on board, but you can do amazing things. And I remember one morning I came up for a watch, and Yorgos had been on, for the last part of the night and the sunrise, and it was my turn to come up. And I go up, to the cockpit, and I'm taking care of my watch and stuff and having coffee, and I pop down to get another cup, and Yorgos is dancing around the boat in his underwear to Zebekiko and wondering where the hell the flour is so he can bake a cake while he's eating cured octopus out of a like stretch tin, like a Spam tin.
Oh my God.
And that's kind of the essence of where you get to. It's like when you get out into the middle of the ocean, you're in the rhythm of it. You're in with the crew. The boat is sound and it's just moving good. And you're on steady winds. And you get to this place that's unlike any other because there is nothing. You're at the center of a tiny universe.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that matters is that we eat today and we take care of each other.
Yeah, it's like you said before, like that your world for that time just really shrinks, and it forces you to appreciate the little things. It sounds like I think maybe a lot of us could use an experience like that. Just kind of forget about this ancillary stuff that's all around us. That doesn't matter. It doesn't affect our lives really, and we consume ourselves every day with this stuff that really is not important. Like I would think, do you feel like that, that experience of being out at sea for that amount of time with that few amount of people, like, do you feel like it really fundamentally changed anything about who you are, like your perspective? Like, was there anything that, like, when you finally finished, did you kind of look at things with fresh eyes, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that I wanted to say that I don't think that there's any one person in the world who couldn't see things differently after an experience like that. And I'm not certain that that's the case because unfortunately I have sailed with people who just don't get it, and it doesn't register anything. And it kind of reminds me of a quote from Yvon Chouinard, who is the founder of Patagonia, the clothing company, but has also done a lot of first ascents and stuff. And he was talking about Everest, people climbing it, and there's thousands of feet of fixed ropes, and you get to, your next camp, and your tent's all made up for you with your pillow and everything. And he said, what, if you compromise the process, you're an asshole when you start out, and you're still an asshole when you get back. But for me, the process was the whole thing, and I still enjoy the process. I mean, 100 and how many thousand miles later, which is, basically 4 times around the earth. I'm still nervous when I leave, and not like in a overly concerned way, but there's a reckoning that happens at sea where that it's the ultimate force.
Mm-hmm.
And all you can do is make sure your boat and your crew are good, and the rest is going to happen along the way.
Yeah, it's kind of like that feeling, like giving up control. Like, I can only do so much. The ocean does what it does, and you just have to deal with it, right?
Yeah.
So before we keep going, do you have a time you need to be done, or you have a hard out?
Not really. No. And I could probably start drinking some of this beer that I poured before we started, but
I just want to make sure we're not eating up your whole evening. So we still have a little time before we are considered going too long. So one of the things, it's a fun question to ask, even though I'm sure the answer would probably take you back to some memories that aren't so fun. But like, were there any close calls while you were out there? Like, I know, sailing can be pretty dangerous. Like any wild things happen at sea?
Yeah.
I know it's kind of a broad question, but
um, yeah, certainly. If you sail long enough and far enough, you're going to find moments that are um, more than you bargained for. Um, and I've seen a lot of those, and I think, I don't know. Looking back on them, it's kind of, it's interesting because a lot of them at the beginning of my career were spent. Let me back up for 1 second. I've found that the sea is kind of an amazing teacher,
okay.
and especially if you're respectful to its power. And I don't know if it's only in my case or how that works, but I found that along the way things got progressively more difficult, as far as what weather and seas I was given. And it's not necessarily from a standpoint of extreme caution or anything, or that, because I was working with real, heavy sea people.
Hmm.
It's just the way that it was handed to me, in my process. But I also know that if I had been given some of the situations that I saw later in my career, I probably would live in the mountains.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I've seen some big stuff, and I've seen big things break, and I've had people's lives in my hands in those moments. And it's funny because as my career went along, I ended up on bigger and bigger boats. But I guess the first kind of anecdote that I could share was when I first started as a skipper myself, captain in Greece. Um, Somebody came down the dock. I arrived in Kos, which is right off the coast of Turkey,
Okay.
near Rhodes. And this guy came down the dock. Are you Dennis? Yeah. Look, I have this boat that I need taken to Syros like yesterday. Can you take it there for me? Yeah, sure. Why not?
Hmm.
And I wasn't. It was my first romp in the Aegean Sea, and it's a heavy place, especially when you're going any direction close to north, which is so. So he gives me this boat. I think it was a 45-foot Jeannot or something like that, and gives me the keys and the rundown. Says I need it in Syros. Leave whenever you're ready. And I took a look at the weather. Not too bad, 15 knots, something like that. I got underway at like 5 a.m. by myself, and by that afternoon, the Greek Coast Guard had declared a no travel advisory for the entire Aegean, and we're talking about ferries the size of cruise ships.
Oh
Like,
boy.
so I'm in what we call the Devil's Triangle by myself, um, and still have, I don't know, 100 miles to go. I'm doing no speed at all, and I'm literally like chained to the wheel of this thing in case I should be washed overboard because I'm by
Jesus.
myself. And
Now,
I've
is that something that's like standard regardless of weather, or is that? I mean,
not always. I mean,
okay.
more now. The older I get, I usually clip myself on, even if it's calm, especially if I'm offshore,
Hmm.
and certainly if I'm alone. But
Okay.
if it's calm weather on a 70-foot yacht that I'm delivering to the Caribbean and I have 6 crew on board and it's the middle of the day, probably not. At night, yeah, you're clipped in.
Gotcha.
Um, but I just remember the other problem is it was like it was not the time of smartphones and stuff. I think I had like a Motorola thing with like one of those tiny little
Like the
Motorola's,
razor.
something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
not even. It wasn't like a flip phone. It was like
Oh wow. So it's pre flip phone.
Yeah, and the battery was dead. There was no way to charge it, and I just had this feeling like I'm probably never gonna say goodbye to anybody. Like this is it.
So how rough was it out there?
It was heavy. I mean, thinking back, I'd probably not even mention it now. But I was 24 years old, never been alone at sea before, and delivered. And the other side of it was, I mean, it was like we're talking about probably 8 to 10 foot seas, um, and very steep. The Aegean is notoriously steep, so 8 to 10 foot seas is fine if they're 14 feet apart. But when they're 6 feet apart,
Yeah.
it gets ugly. So um, I finally got to Syros at like 3 o'clock in the morning and circled around off of the main harbor of Hermopoli and put all my fenders out, got lines ready, got sails down, and entered and made the phone call to the base manager from the other base manager. He'd given me this contact. When you get there, call this guy. So I call him and I said, yeah. He's like, oh my God, we've been so worried about you. The weather's horrible. Where are you? And I said, I'm here, man. And I'm really tired. I've been sailing for like 23 hours. So, if somebody could come out here in a dinghy and just give me a hand, that would be great. But where are you? I don't see you. And I'm like, dude, I'm the only asshole circling around this harbor in the middle of the night with the fenders out. And he's like, but okay, where exactly are you? I said, I'm in Syros, in Hermopoli, in the main harbor. And he's, oh, no, no, no. You have to come to Finikas on the other side of the island. So I'm like, I'm going to call you back. This is the last battery that I have. I'm like, this is why I saved it, because I need it for this moment. I called the guy back in Coast that gave me the boat. And I'm like, yeah, man, I'm here. I'm in Hermopoli. And he's like, but you were supposed to go to Finikas. And I said, yeah, well, probably would have been good to tell me that before I left, right? Oh, shit. I went, fuck you, fuck your family. So I tied the boat up for the night and I brought it in the next day.
Smart move at that point, it would seem to me.
Yeah, so and then I've seen a lot bigger things since then, and it's hard to really quantify it. But like, I took a rogue wave in the Sea of Albaron, which is basically the lead up out of the Mediterranean toward the Strait of Gibraltar.
Okay.
That little oval there is the Albaran Sea, and took a rogue wave in there one night, and it just big important things turned into splinters, which was pretty amazing because I'd never seen anything like that before, and that was long into my career.
Yeah. You weren't alone for that one, were you?
I wasn't. No, I mean, the rest of the crew was asleep. I was alone on the bridge, and I felt it. I was hand steering because it was so heavy, and I remember this feeling of like, waves come in series and sets, right? So I felt the first one, and it was like that was really irregular, and I'm going away from them. So and it's in the middle of the night. I can't see behind me or anything, and I just felt something was off, and I steered the best I could, and I felt it come and pick the whole boat up. We're talking about a 62-foot catamaran, so it's 30 feet wide. I mean, this is a huge piece of equipment. It's like bigger than most people's houses, and the whole thing just went up on her end. And when it broke, I was probably 30 feet up, and it broke way above me back here and knocked me flat.
Jesus.
And once I'd gotten things stabilized again, I went down to I was on a fly bridge on a cat, so that's kind of a deck up. And I walked down to the cockpit to see what had gone on, and all of this heavy furniture, like cockpit furnishings that are built in, there was just little fragments of them.
Holy shit.
And the doors to the main salon area, which were closed, and good watertight like sea doors. There's like 6 inches of water in the salon just draining down into the hulls, and it was a very much, the rest of the crew came up. What happened? What did you do?
There's no icebergs in the Alberts Sea. What the
I
hell
didn't
was
do that. God did.
Yeah. You see what God just did to us, man?
Exactly.
So, like you say, I mean, we spoke briefly, before we started this. You mentioned you've been to like 80 plus countries. Is that am I remembering that properly?
I think it's more like 60.
Okay.
I like, as far as, I used to really quantify experience, and I still do. Like if I'm interviewing a sailor for a position or something on another boat,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's a lot about miles, because that means experience for me.
Okay.
Because you could sit at a dock and have a position, all summer long for 6 years, but that doesn't make you a sailor.
Yeah.
That makes you really good at polishing stainless steel. And for me, as my career has, I would say, like I'm moving into a different part of it,
Mm-hmm.
um, where I'm less dependent on big yachts and owners and charters and things like that. I'm not running someone else's program. I'm running my own, which is something that I've wanted to do for a long time. And over the past few years, that's really blossomed in a nice way. But
Well, hang on. So let's actually get
um,
into that since you brought that up. Like, so now you have your own business, correct? Like, you're the
yeah,
big
yeah.
cheese now, right?
I'm the stinky cheese, maybe, but yeah, no, we have our own business. My wife and I. We own a 1957 classic boat that's completely built of wood. It's kind of just the sweetest design that ever came out of New England. They're very special boats, and um, they the boat that we have came to us after a long trip in Greece. We were running a 57 on deck, 72-foot overall wood schooner. And it just kind of dawned on us that this is, we have all the capabilities in the world. Why are we always doing this for someone else
Mm-hmm.
on someone else's program?
Of course.
And we've been spending a lot of time taking photographs, with really solid professional gear, and getting honed in on that craft. A lot of people think they're photographers these days because they have an iPhone and a filter.
Yeah.
But
I know those
when
guys.
you
Yeah, they want to take pictures
when
of
you
your
put the
girlfriend. No,
camera
no, it's
in,
professional. I swear. Yeah.
when you put the camera in manual mode, it kind of separates the men from the boys, I guess. But
Yeah.
we were running and gunning through Greece for more, I don't know, I got about a year and a half,
Okay.
and shooting these incredible images. And we thought, what we'd really like to do is buy our own little wooden boat and create really mostly like a combination of editorial branding content for outdoor brands, and our own passion work, artistic work, for fine art photography. So we kind of got that wild hair up our ass to do that, and then we just went and did it. We sat for months in Greece. We were going to buy this lovely little 42-foot wooden schooner, and we got to the table to trade keys and money. And the guy who we were going to buy it from, he was just too attached to the boat. He
Mm-hmm.
built it himself 40 years ago, and he was getting too old to use it, but he couldn't let it go. And he ended up raising the price by like 300%. And so we just had to get up and walk away, which was gutting. But um, there wasn't at that point there was really no reason to be there any longer, and with visas and the rest of it, it was like we have to go back to the
How
U.S.
how
now.
long ago was that?
That was 2018.
Okay. So
So
now, yeah, now you're in. Is that when you came straight back? Have you been in Rhode Island this whole time?
no, not the whole time.
Okay.
We've done some other trips down to the West Indies. We spent some time in Haiti, in a little out island down off the coast of Haiti, and we've done some cool stuff here and there. But when we got back, we were really pretty broken about that because we had this vision for what this business could be,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, getting back here, it was kind of like falling into the old rhythm. Okay, let's take on our old clients, and we'll take care of these boats and this boat, and put together this program. And within, I would say, within like 2 months, really, because we got back and it was still this time of year, and it was kind of cold and dreary, and
Mm-hmm.
that was psychologically affected our process quite a lot because we were just in the middle of like paradise, and now we're like
Yeah.
in New England living in my in-laws basement and wondering where our life is going. And but once the weather came around and we started working the boat yards and stuff, putting boats back together that we looked after, this boat that we now own just kind of came running at us. It was like the most obvious situation in the world, and frankly, a gift, because the contrast of where the two boats were, the schooner in Greece and this boat when we bought her, were
Mm-hmm.
just not at all on the same page. I mean, we'd probably still be in Greece with the sandpaper trying to figure out how to get underway. But at the same time, it's more expensive here,
Yeah.
and so I think there was a default in our thinking that instead of shooting for the stars, we probably ought to make some money. And we it wasn't nothing. We spent everything that we had on the boat and getting it to where it needed to be to float and sail and be beautiful as it should be. So there was kind of this default of like, well, let's start a charter business. And that's what we did for the first season. And it went super well. It was amazing. I mean, it's still, we didn't run last summer because of the pandemic and the close quarters. And there was no way to observe the, protocols for COVID that would allow us to ensure the safety of our passengers. And
Yeah, that makes
in,
sense.
in hundreds of charters around the world, that's all that I've done. And there was no way that I was going to compromise that for money. So it just pushed us over the edge to say, we're not doing that, and this is what we're doing. And so we've spent the last, I guess it's a year now, developing this commercial photography business that's really taking flight and really quite exciting.
Well, it's awesome that you've been able to make ends meet now with the pandemic has put so many people out of business, and it's just been such a mess for everybody. I'm really happy to hear that you guys were able to keep things together. That's great. So we're actually, I'm gonna say we're running up on the end here. So we have this whole big list that I knew we weren't going to get to everything. So
Yeah, it's bound to happen because I never shut up.
no. Hey, that's why I have you here. I need somebody. I can't have one word answers here. So you're doing a beautiful job. But what I'll do is the last question I'm going to ask you is, all this sailing, all the traveling, all the people you've met, like you have a very different perspective than I would say upwards of 90% of the the population. What do you think is one of the most unique and most valuable lessons you've learned along the way? Something that maybe defines you, something that has really helped you and really guided you in your life? What do you think, if you could narrow it down to one thing off the top of your head, what do you think that would be? Your biggest takeaway from your life's journey?
Wow, that's
I
a
know.
hell of a question,
Yeah.
Steve.
So let me rephrase it, Dennis. What is the
No,
meaning of
no,
life?
no.
Something a little easier, you know.
um,
I'll tell you what. Let me let me
no, no,
let
no.
me.
I'm going to
Oh,
answer
okay.
your
Okay. Sorry.
question. Just give me a second to kind of formulate my thought on it. It's a complex question, so it's a complex answer. But to me, that thing that really resonates is that most people don't know what they're capable of, what their real power is. And that they don't know it because they've never been challenged. And I feel it myself at moments. And I remember this kind of will link nicely back to Mr. Badger. When we launched her, she was a mess. She was, sitting on the hard for a year, and you could see daylight through the planks and stuff, and that's not going to make a floating boat.
Yeah.
But on top of that, she was at a place where the yard manager, when we bought her, came to us and said, "You have 3 weeks to get this out of my yard." And that's a tall order. So yeah, we worked on it for 16, 20 hours a day. We had some great friends come and help, and there was a real power behind it. And she went in the water and she floated, and we had this beautiful renaming ceremony. And I remember sitting afterward, just kind of all of the madness is, it's 3 weeks of 20, 30-hour days. If there's that many hours in a day, that's what we did.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to a good friend of mine, I wish that I could share this feeling with me in the future, when I'm feeling like it's not going to work out, when I'm feeling like the world's crashing down and that I'm not going to make it.
Mhm.
Because I always will. And that's it's such a hard thing to describe to people who
No, I
haven't.
I get it. It's like you feel that hope, that optimism at that time, and you know you're gonna need it down the road. It's like almost as I wish I could bottle it up and just put it on the shelf for later, for a
And
rainy
just
day.
take a sip of it when yeah.
Yeah, I get that. That makes perfect sense. But I love that people don't know what they're capable of. I think that's 100% true. How many people have just never been tested? You don't know what's underneath until you have no choice but to let it come out.
Right.
Like I think that's a great what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. It's a great lesson. I don't know. My
Yeah,
words are escaping me at the moment.
it's something untangible that we're all looking for, in a way that is not super evident. And there's not a way to do that unless you go out and climb a mountain or cross an ocean, or it doesn't even need to be that. It doesn't need to be that like outdoor extreme kind of thing that I've done with my life. I mean, it could be as simple as taking care of homeless people, or
Hmm.
um, it's
Getting outside your comfort
that's not a
zone.
simple thing either. So let's not mince the words there. But
Yeah.
yeah, you have to find your own way to find your own potential. And until you get to the point where you feel like you can't go any farther, you will never know how far you can go.
I love it. I think that's a great way to end it. So, for the listeners out there, do you have anything you want to plug anywhere they could find you? I know like you have a business. Like where can people find out more about you and what you're doing?
So yeah, well, our photography business is Little Schooner Studios. And my Instagram handle is Cap'n Darling, CAPN Darling. And Yeah, I mean, I just I hope that at least one person found something worthwhile here.
Oh, I'm positive they did. But Dennis, dude, I really appreciate you taking the time to come talk to me and all my jerk off listeners. I'm kidding, guys. You're not jerk offs, but I think that I would love. I mean, I know. I'm sure we didn't even scratch the surface of this wealth of experience you have. I could see it. I could see it in your in the way you carry yourself. I could see it in your background. For fuck's sake, you know what I mean. But I'm really grateful that you came on to talk to us. So I just want to say thank you.
Steve, I really appreciate you taking the time, man, and reaching out. It's been far too long. The fact that we don't know any of this stuff about each other is a crime in itself. But
Well, listen, we'll get into some more good stuff off camera. So
sounds good. But
right.
I want to say thank you because your questions and your process here are very well thought out and well put together. So
well, it's been my pleasure. We're back. That's it. We're back. We didn't really leave. You guys were there the whole time. I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Dennis is a really nice dude, really kind, really thoughtful, and just has gotten to do some awesome, cool shit, man. Like, it was just really fun and really good to hear from him after all these years and see he's still going strong. Yeah, so big thanks to him. Make sure you check out his stuff online. Follow the links that I just posted that you saw. And, as always, you guys know where to find us, A Pot Amongst Men, on Instagram, on Twitter. You can email any questions you want answered at apotamongstmen@gmail.com. And make sure you like and subscribe this YouTube video that you're watching. So it's on YouTube. And if you're listening, make sure you go check it out on YouTube. But even if you're not going to watch it, at least, like it, subscribe to it, and just show some love. That helps a lot. The stupid numbers on YouTube and social media actually do matter, which is crazy to say, but it's true. Make sure you guys subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening, whether it's on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio. Wherever you get your podcasts, you will find us there. And yeah, I guess that's it. Till next week. See you later, guys. Peace.